10 days before everybody saw me take this like dream job of national television, I checked myself into Columbia's psych ward.
Today on the Quite Frankly podcast.
What do you think your intention is now, like in life?
Ginger Z, the most famous meteorologist in America.
And we were going in, and it was rainy and misty, and this is a part of the world where the glaciers are melting 3 times faster than the rest of the world. And it was falling apart as we were walking on it. You could feel it cracking, you could feel it melting, you could hear it, and then we were seeing crumbling parts off the sides of the mountains.
Covering natural disasters.
People who are like against climate change will say, well, that's what the Earth does.
Well, they're right. That is what the Earth does. But the Earth doesn't do it this fast. And that's what we've given it a real boost. And that's the unfortunate part, is that we don't know how it will react. We have ideas of how it's going to react. We're kind of living the reaction that has been forecast, more extremes, more closely together.
And sometimes being a natural disaster.
I wrote a lot about lying and where I learned how to lie, and that was really through eating disorder and like what it taught me and why I became almost expert level at it.
Ever since I wrote my goals down with the pen, my dreams and reality have both been blending in. I just hope that in the end, my dad don't extend me.
New York is hard for me. I tried this time to not like send my energy toward New York ahead of coming here, because I know my energy would just start creating chaos for me, because like that's what you want, it's what you expect from New York, you know? Yeah. But people are like, what's your favorite part of New York? And I'm like, my favorite part of New York is LA.
I remember moving here, and I had freelanced, and so, not freelanced, I'm sorry, like moonlit for NBC. And I had been here like to visit as a tourist. My mom's from Long Island, so like I felt like I had some sort of connection, but I'd never really spent time.
Yeah.
And when it was becoming real that I was gonna get a job, I didn't know about which job, and I was coming here more often, I was like, I looked around and I was like, everyone looks so tired. Like I've never seen people look more tired, and it is a city that never sleeps for a reason, because there's so much, and that's the part that I've still been inspired by, and I can say that I still love about it, is in almost every other place I've lived, I felt like I was running faster. Here, I can't keep up.
Whoa.
In a good way, you know?
Yeah,
I'm still at that point in my life, I guess, that I want that.
Well, it's interesting, people like you who have that drive, because it's like, first of all, you're a mom.
Yep.
So already, like right after this, you're going to kindergarten, you know? Like
kindergarten
you
screening
juggle
time.
it. Yeah, you don't like let something fall, which is super impressive, because any one of these things, like most famous meteorologist in the world, mom of 2, like all these things, wife, going to events, but you still do it all. Any one of those is a lot.
Yeah, and then it just becomes about prioritizing, and then you do drop things all the time. You have to drop, and it's choosing what you drop and when you drop it. Like that's really what it's been about. And that I've learned, even in the last 5 years, I've learned a lot about. It's not just like saying no, it's how you do it, where you do it, and what your intention is behind it. And that's what I've changed, I think, and it has made a difference. Maybe it's just internally, but I think it's what comes out and what externally.
Yeah. What do you think your intention is now, like in life?
So I've worked with my therapist for over a decade now, and I've had, which is hard. It's hard to have a 10-year relationship, let alone a great therapist that you feel like you're still growing through and from. And he and I have worked so much on parenting, because that's the part that I have not mastered. Nobody masters it, but that's the part I want to put the priority in. And so that's my intention, is to make sure they know, even with all these things that I do, I'm gonna be gone 3 nights this week. I'm not gonna see them for 4 nights. I'm not gonna tuck them in. They need to know and that they are the priority, even when mommy's not here. And having a connection with children in that attachment period, which is so important. I'm terrified of doing that wrong, and so I've worked extremely intentionally on how to set that before I leave and when I come home, and as I go between, you know, each night that I do FaceTime or whatever, the words I choose, the notes I leave, the things that I do to make sure that that connection is developed. You and I have known each other for a long time. If I pick up the phone and we have a conversation, you know that the connection is there. We don't have to like necessarily work on it. It helps to have repetition. With kids, it's different, and you have to really set it up, especially if you're their parent. So.
You know, what came to mind is when you said it's like so difficult to maintain that, is I'm staying with somebody now in Brooklyn, and she's a gorgeous, like six-story townhouse, and I feel like even though I'm on a third level and she's on the first, and I can hear her and the kids and like all the work she does.
Yeah.
But we were having dinner last night, and there was something that was said at the table, and when they walked away, she was like, "It's so hard to not make them feel ashamed or feel guilty. Like there's, no matter what you say, they're gonna feel something." And so, you know what I mean?
The word I use and have learned a lot about is not just intention, but it's how you. It's not the words you use to kids. It is the modeling, but it's the, now I'm forgetting the word that I'm like, I know all about this, but I'm working on a lot, it's the intent that you say the words with. It's the, it's not empathy, apathy? I'll think of it. But whatever it is that you can give a child a look and you don't need words, both in good and bad ways. You can have a connection. Sometimes people overuse words because it's a space filler, a void filler. They're extremely vulnerable, so they're like, blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Versus having the intention that connects you and that feeling that they should feel or do feel. But shame comes really easily. And being a parent, shame's kind of built in. Like, don't do that.
Right.
You don't want to stunt something that's within there. Our 5-year-old right now is lying a lot.
It's literally what she told me yesterday about her 5-year-old.
Yeah. This is normal.
Whoa.
This is when you start stretching boundaries. Certain kids do it more than others. He's stretching boundaries with stories. I find it so fascinating and imaginative, and I'm like, ooh, I love it. Ben's like, we don't lie in this house, because his experience with lying has been very black and white, and it should be. What I love about my husband is how black and white he is. I have been the gray my whole life. I've gotten more black and white so that I can survive, because I was so gray. I was like into a foggy, misty, like couldn't live anymore. But as we're raising a child, I'm like, well, how about we teach him that he can tell all the stories he wants, but at one point, the beginning or the end, he needs to say, and that was a story.
I love that.
Because I don't want to shame him away from, because most of the stories are pretty benign.
Yeah.
They're funny. He knows they're funny. He's a performer already. You don't want to stunt
cool.
that. Like, I don't want to stop it. But yes, lying in general.
And he sees his dad performing.
Yes,
and
so I think I don't want to put something on him, also something I'm trying not to do, but I see he is obviously very creative. He comes home, all he does is color, paint. He wants so much to make something and to perform and then have someone react. And the reaction you get from a lie is usually pretty cool.
Right, right.
So like, we just have to talk through it rather than shaming away from it.
I'm gonna jump way ahead than
Yeah.
what I was going to, and it's because you just said that the lying can get more attention and more a reaction, right?
I lied my whole life for that. A lot of my life, and that caused me
Like what? Give me an
incredible
example.
pain.
And I'm sure it's in your book too.
Yeah, it's in my book. I wrote a lot about lying and where I learned how to lie, and that was really through eating disorder and like what it taught me and why I became almost expert level at it, because I was almost a study of lying. You know, and at that point, that's not acting. That is an intentional manipulation of truth so that either you can hide something or you can make yourself less vulnerable. And that's what I was doing. Every chance I could, not in career though, this is the weird part. Like in my career, it just kept growing and I didn't really need to lie or to buffer anything. And I actually felt I wouldn't have done it there. It was in my personal life.
Yeah, because that's where you wanted the attention or the
where I wanted the attention.
reaction.
I wanted the protection of with men. Oh my gosh, I lie to men left and right because I was very much I think they call it a tree swinger. Like you hold onto one branch but you don't let go until you get in the other ones in your hand. So I did a lot of crossing over with men. And was not honest about that, and they would have thought that we were, well on our way to
headed
something.
To marriage.
That's right, and I would have been like, I really haven't let go of that other one yet, because I wasn't sure of the attachment to them, and that goes much deeper. And I hadn't worked on all that, and the chaos that created in my life, and the self-hate that it created through lying, and that's why I'm so tender about it. Because I'm like, of course I don't want him to lie. I want him to learn this. And I don't think mine was born very differently than the 5-year-old natural thing that happens. We're not there yet. But gosh, it's important to settle that with yourself. And the worst part, and where I was the sickest, was lying to myself. And when you can lie to yourself, there is no truth for anyone else.
Right.
And I had to lie to myself because I hated myself.
Oof.
And I was so much deep hate that it was too hard to be honest.
And for people who wouldn't know, because I know your story, but how long ago are we talking here?
I think it started in my teens. I mean, you know, like most people start having self-image issues, or mine really was a control issue early. My parents divorced, and we had a really pretty chaotic childhood. My mom definitely had some mental health issues that couldn't be figured out at the time. She tried, and there just wasn't a solution at that time. And it was hard to live with her. And my stepfather came in, he was a counselor, and it was like finally an adult was there and someone else, and it was really relieving, but also still scary because it was like this new person, and it was, you know, again, everybody's level of what they describe as their childhood is different. I have this like gracious look at it now because now I'm a parent and I'm like, oh man, it really wasn't that bad. I've learned so much about, he came from the Netherlands as a young boy and had a very different upbringing too because of being an immigrant, and there was no ESL, there was no learning English. He was just a very different background. So the two of them together was volcano, tornado, fire, ice. It was not a great idea in the first place. But post-divorce, I think any divorce for kids is difficult because it takes your universe, and that's all you know. Your identity is supposed to be starting to form after you're 7. Like, you really have the attachments are done, and now you're starting to form your identity.
Yeah.
They divorced when I was 7. Like, in the textbook, that's a very difficult time to then say, who am I going to be now that I'm independent of this one thing that I've known for my entire 7 years? Sounds really small, but in a child's life, it's formative. That is when you are forming everything about yourself.
Right.
So I think that's where it started. And by age 10, I figured it out. I'm like, oh, I'll control through food, you know, and I didn't say that to myself, but that's how an eating disorder can manifest. And then it started there. I think that the lying to myself and to others started there, and then it just spiraled really, really badly. I had great friends. I still have those friends, so it's not like I wasn't lying and a terrible person, but in the parts of my relationships, especially in romantic relationships, because I didn't have a good model for that, it started there and it never ended. It ended only when I finally got the real help I needed. So fast forward then through, gosh, you don't have time for the many, many stories, but until I moved here. And I had just gotten out of an abusive relationship, and I was like the perfect candidate for. And I was still kind of trying to get out of it. It's very hard. It's not like it just ends and you can clean slate and move on.
What kind of abusive relationship?
Emotional. Yeah, he was. I used to say I wish he would have hit me because I felt like it would be easier, which is terrible to say because physical abuse is also incredibly, difficult. But I think the manipulation and emotion, and I find that this is where when people talk about how abuse doesn't discriminate, it doesn't matter how intelligent you are or where you grew up or how much money or what color you are, abuse is abuse. And you can be abused in many different places and many different parts of our world. And so I had never had that, and it was so difficult to get out of. And so when I moved here, and again, we could go back to the mental health parts that include attempts of suicide and a lot of self-harm and hate. When I got here, I had the feeling and had promised my cousin, who is now the emergency manager of Chicago, that if I ever had that feeling again, that I wanted to just end my life, that I would call her. And I think it was a combination. I was supposed to start this job.
You told her that back then?
I told her back after this second attempt, and
Yeah.
she was like, this is what I need from you. I need you to, I'm a safe place, you can call me and tell me. But you have to promise you're going to call and tell me that. And I will come no matter where you are or whatever. So I had just kind of gotten out of that, but not really out of it. I had moved here because I was supposed to start my job in like 2 weeks. And
The GMA job?
yep.
Okay.
So I'm supposed to start at ABC
Well,
News.
so you were in this relationship all the way up until then.
Yeah.
Wow.
Still all the way through when
I might have read
started
that
it.
in the book and just forgot because
Yeah,
it's been years now, but wow.
It's pretty wild to think that I was that twisted.
And it goes to show, like, you can look at somebody on TV, picture perfect, and you just never know.
No, that's the beauty of starting my book that way. Is like 10 days before everybody saw me take this like dream job of national television, I checked myself into Columbia's psych ward. And that's a big statement because like we're at the point where we're all like, oh, I suffer with depression or anxiety, or I go to therapist. Everyone's like, cool.
But even people down the street will be like, I'm bipolar, like just as
sorry,
I don't know what, say
right.
it as a saying, yeah.
But at least we're getting to the point where we can talk about it. When I say I checked myself into a psych ward, people are like,
right, yeah.
We still get a little eyebrow raise, which I think that's a big part of what I'd like to leave behind is we shouldn't. You know, like I went to the hospital because I needed to go to the hospital because I needed help. And I wouldn't have gotten that I should have done it 10 years before. My mom told me always that I needed to do it. But so to go back to where I was and why my mental health had been really at that point, I had learned only just enough to want to save it. And honestly, I wanted to work with Diane Sawyer. I'd worked my whole butt off my whole life. And I thought how stupid this would be. And there was like that glimmer of hope. I was afraid of him. I was afraid of myself. And I thought, I need to go somewhere safe. And the hospital was it. So I called my cousin. I said, this is happening. I was actually with him kind of weighing down something in DC. She flew there from Chicago. She drove me up to New York and she helped me check in. And what the inpatient situation does for you, it's not fun. It's so scary. At first I was looking around, I'm like,
what did I do?
Yeah, I don't need to be here. Come to find out, I could have left, but they assess you and they were not going to let me leave until I was not unsafe.
Wow.
And I didn't realize that until just recently when I was talking to my therapist about it. I'm like, oh wait, so I really needed to be there. And he was like, yeah.
Oh, you didn't even know that you weren't allowed to leave?
Correct.
Wow.
I didn't understand any of it, I don't think. I didn't understand until just recently that, no, I would have been able to if I was safe. They really deemed me unsafe.
Yeah.
That's how bad it was. But I think in my relative mind, that's the thing, is all of us are like, well, I'm not bad enough to have to go to that.
Right.
If you have suicidal thoughts, that is bad. And we need to look at it as such, because there are ways and treatments and therapies that can make you not have those thoughts. And I think that's what I didn't understand for a decade of my life, and how close I got. And this is why it's my responsibility to talk about this stuff, because there's so many people who don't get this chance, you know. And I've spoken to thousands of people at a time that have lost their children. I was in a room in Canada a couple years ago, and they had all lost their children to suicide. And I was like, this is my job. This is actually what I'm supposed to do, is go around, because we as a society need to treat it differently.
And maybe also focus more on the things you're talking about rather than numbing with alcohol or with weed or whatever else.
Yeah.
I was talking to somebody yesterday, she said she doesn't drink, and she was like, you know, my parents, my whole life I'd watch them drink, and all their friends would drink and they'd like lose control, and she's like, it turned me off. I never wanted it.
Interesting.
Yeah, it's interesting. But she was like, they were just numbing, you know. And she's like, they literally would just, my mom would get sad and she'd drink and eat chocolate, you know. And my point to that is how much better to hear this message of like, why don't you maybe check yourself in, or look at it even if you don't think you need it.
Well, and you're hitting the baseline of all of the issues. It starts with water, food, and sleep. It's so boring, but it really is the very basis of our mental health that very few people are doing.
Wait, how's your sleep
correctly? Last night was not great.
Not last night, in general.
I blame it on my dog. No, I'm really protective of my sleep because I know that for my mental health, we all joke like when babies, they're like, oh, well, the baby needs sleep. We all need sleep.
We all need sleep. In my 20s, I slept 3-4 hours a night because I'd be doing like GMA World News Nightline, GMA World News Nightline, travel, next plane, you know? Now I'm so protective of my sleep. Yeah,
and that's all it takes is, and there's what we were just saying at the very beginning, there's the boundary, there's the setup for true glory of your life is to be able to, I'll drop everything if I feel like I do after I've done a stint like that. And I learned that the hard way, like you did, you know, like just running as fast as you can, saying yes to every single show, to every single thing. And part of my whole career is built on saying yes. But there is a point where you have to say, I can't say yes to the next thing if I don't get this time.
Or it's like, I'm not saying no. I learned this recently and it changed my life. I'm not saying no, I'm saying yes tomorrow. You know, somebody asked me like, they want to sponsor this podcast, and they're amazing. And I love the brand, but I already have 3 sponsors right now, and I want to make sure they're extremely happy with everything before I get any more.
And you'll
which
be next.
sounds crazy, right?
Yeah.
But I'm also like, I'm not saying no because they were disappointed. I'm saying yes in September.
Yes.
You know?
Yes, but
it's
that's
a
it.
massive change.
And my mom taught me this in all of her wonderfulness that she taught me about dreaming. She's never one to take no, but it's not always a bad thing. It's a we'll make it happen together. It's a collaboration. She always offers the thing that works best for both instead of no or yes.
So
it is,
important.
and that is gray in a way, like that is. But she taught me that early when I was in college. Nobody had ever graduated with a meteorology degree, and I had 2 minors, and nobody had ever done that and graduated early. So I went to the registrars, and I'm like, I got an opportunity to work in radio. I want to get out of here early. I'd like to graduate a semester ahead. And they were like, yeah, no, that's not going to happen. So nobody's ever done that. And I went and told my mom. I was super disappointed. I'm like, I'm going to have to tell that job no, and that's a great opportunity. Wow. And she's like, what are you talking about? She said, turn around. You go back there and you tell them, I'm going to be the first to do that. Wow. And you're going to let me, and we're all going to do it, and it's going to be amazing.
What a cool mom.
Yeah, and I was like, okay. And so that type of, it is dreaminess, but it's also very realistic. Like she said, you can do this, and it's not going to hurt them. She's like, make it sound good to them. You're going to have the first student that ever graduated early, make it work.
And got a job at a radio station.
That's
yeah.
right. Now I want to hear from your friend and her 5-year-old. I was just telling a story this
She's
morning.
next. She's coming on the podcast
really?
next. Yeah.
We got to tell her. So last night, Miles, I'm putting him to sleep, and at the end, we have a whole ritual that we do at night, and I always say at the end, big huggy, big kissy, and he is usually the snugglier one and easy, like everybody's different that way. And he goes, nope, you're not allowed to touch me. And I said, well, that's new. Why am I not allowed to touch you? He goes, I don't want anyone to touch me. And I said, well, did something happen? Because you get like a worried, did someone touch you? And I go, God.
Yeah.
And he goes, no, you're just not allowed to. And I was like, wait, but you just said everybody. And he's like, well, you're not. And I'm like, okay, well, if that changes, or if you'd like to discuss why, I'll be in my room. I waited 5 minutes, which is usually because he can't go to bed without the ritual, like he needs it. And then he comes in. As he's entering the room, he goes, I'll tell you which days of the week you can touch me. And I was like, okay, controlling manipulator. And he's like an emotional terrorist, this kid. He is already digging in, and like he wakes up, I joke all the time, thinking, who am I going to make elevate today, and who am I gonna like get into, and who am I gonna piss off, and because it's part of his show, it's part of his, it's beautiful, but it's really needs to be honed.
Yeah.
Because it's scary. I said no, and I giggled, of course, because he's telling me which day I can hug him. I said, honey, that's not how it works. You're not allowed to do that. A hug comes from a feeling, or like we have at night, it's a ritual. If you don't feel like it, that's totally fine, and you're allowed to tell someone, I don't feel like a hug right now. But you're not allowed to set that up on a calendar on your terms, because that's not what a hug is for. It's for a shared, and I've learned about this, and this is something I'd love to talk about because I think it's very common. Our attachment as children sets up who we are in physical touch very much. It's a love language, right? It's like a way that love is shared, and how that is something within my marriage I've had to work extremely hard in. It's not natural for me.
Physical touch.
Physical touch.
Interesting.
It is, I've gotten much better.
How is it with Ben?
Tough, and he knows it. And it's not specific to him, tough with everyone. Easier actually with you, because I know what the responsibility is. There's not a lot of vulnerability necessarily with that, because a hug is supposed to be that. The intention of a hug is to it's to release there's a emotional cap that we all have. A hug can help to take it back down if it's kind of overspilled, just like crying does. And there's real physical reasons behind what these things do, or are supposed to do. Hug is extremely healthy.
So in a more intimate relationship,
yes,
it's
harder.
It's harder.
And so we've had to work a lot, and I've worked so long with my therapist, and I've gotten much better, but it's not, and unfortunately, that is one of Ben's biggest love languages. He loves touch, and he wants holding and laying in bed and holding, and I'm like, God,
I wish we had time, or maybe we can do this off camera if you're ever open to it, but I would love to do you've never done it with me, but a healing session,
Yes.
an energy healing session.
Yes.
Because you know what came to mind? And it might all overlap. So thank you for saying yes. It might all overlap. I have a friend who's a bodybuilder, was a bodybuilder for years, not anymore, hasn't been for years. But he had an eating disorder that was really bad bulimia. When I did the emotional healing for him, we kept going back to age six. I was like, what happened at age 6? He's like, age 6, my parents got a divorce and I thought it was my fault.
Yeah.
So because there was self-abuse, vulnerability, all these, and I was like, why are you getting all these at age 6? So I asked him, and parents got a divorce, and then you said divorce at 7. And it's like, we think we're doing it, oh, I'm a bodybuilder, I have an eating disorder for that. It's actually, no, the root cause is at age 6, your parents got a divorce, you thought it was your fault.
For sure.
When we clear it, it's gone. It's insane.
Yeah, I mean, I'm open to everything because I think I've worked very much in, and then I've talked a lot about what that in the energy form, what it is for a chakra. It's for like women in general are often.
And I clear that for people sometimes with women, especially if they're trying to have a baby and they can't. Sometimes I'll go to their root chakra, which is family, or their sacral chakra, and then the way I clear it is I see what is causing that to be misaligned, and then we look under, and then there's
you know,
these
this is what my
underlying things.
sister's doing in Kauai now. She moved to Kauai, and her and her boyfriend have started like a relationship one for people with their sex lives and their intimacy.
Who's doing this?
My sister.
Wow.
Yeah. Anyway, very exciting.
Yeah.
But she's talked about this because it's not, and that's the other thing that's strange. I know it isn't just the vulnerability of myself, which is a huge part, but I've healed that part so very much, and I've worked so hard on that. A lot of it becomes the habitual part and what I'm comfortable with. There actually is a comfort that you create with a baby when they've had, and it starts with, that's why they encourage skin to skin, and why they want, that is what a baby only knows. A baby can't see, it can't hear really well in those first couple months. All it knows is warmth, touch, and hold. And if you didn't have that, that can sometimes direct how your feeling of touch goes. And so in different decades, because the practices of post-baby have changed and evolved over time, I believe it's like 1940s and 50s is when it starts to change, and they take the baby away right away, and they wrap it up, and they put it away from, and that changed a whole generation, just in the way that the hospitals practiced. It changed a whole generation of emotionality and attachment with physical touch, which then eventually changes a lot of other things. Culturally, how you don't match, because that didn't happen everywhere. I'm talking about, mid-century America, right? Like, and it's so interesting how our societal practice then could change generations of people.
Someone said to me, why do you crave safety in relationships? Like I always look for someone that I feel like, oh, I'll be safe with that person. You know what I mean?
So like they're not going to leave, you mean?
No, safety like actual protection. Like someone that I know
like is going to jump in front of you for a bullet?
Exactly. Yes. That's all I want. And then I realized the next day, I only realized that I'm like doing a workout, and I'm like, oh, I was born into a civil war in Lebanon.
Yeah.
And then moved to California when I was 5 months old. So my entrance into the world was, hey, this is not a safe place.
Yeah.
You need safety. Look for protection.
Well, and your parents probably gave that to you and made it known.
Oh, yes.
Also emotionally and maybe verbally and all those things, that safety, that's what they did it for.
Right.
They wanted to make you safe. Maybe, I don't know, I'm guessing.
Probably true, yeah. And they were to this day, they're so nurturing. My parents are overseas right now traveling, and even they know I'm in New York. They know I'm doing an interview. They'll know when I get home. Like my parents are, and I'm 35 years old.
Follow your friend.
Yeah, no, they'll literally like message me and be like, "Did you make it? Where are you? Are you back? Are you in DC yet?" You know? Yeah, and
well, that's their attachment. So then that comes from, and they had to develop that. So and then the wars, so my father came from Rotterdam. My grandmother, who I was very close with, was taken by the Nazis and forced to work. So enslaved is the best word for it. It's like a very hard word to say, but that's what they did with Dutch people. The Germans came and stole them away. And my grandfather, my Opa, was, they didn't know each other yet, but he was also forced to work as a soldier for them. I don't know if he was paid though, but she definitely was not.
She was not paid. So it is, slavery.
Yes, it's like strange that it's different, obviously.
Right.
But not. They came to her home, ripped her out of her house and her siblings, and said, "We're putting you to work." And her and her sister went to work in the like mess halls. Anyway, so I think that formative part, not only do we have that generational, we've heard so much about it, especially with African American families that then come and you have like this DNA-based trauma.
Yeah.
I really think, of course, then you have the environmental trauma and the things that they, have with them. After that, she had a real distaste for Europe, and she was like, I gotta go. And when she met a man, they were like in their late 20s, which was really late back then, because she was born in 1919. Right. So like, usually got married
at like 14, 16.
Yes,
yeah.
not 28, 29. So they waited, for this, and really the war kind of stunted their whole kind of development in life. The combination between that and like, let's get the hell out of here, this place is nuts, I never want that to happen again. They had my dad, and then they had to save money to move because they were still under this same thing, like, but the opposite, where it wasn't about safety, it was like, let's get out. Let's
probably was that for my parents.
Yeah, and like,
yeah.
We need to leave, even though it took them a long time. So I think he's 8 when they finally get over, and they took the ship over. And my dad always says he was sold a bill of goods that this was America, and he really thought they'd get here and there would be cowboys.
Yeah.
And then he gets here in the 1960s in New York City, and he's like, oh.
Oh, you came to New York?
Yeah, because that's where you sail into.
Yeah.
And he was like, this isn't America. That's not the thing I saw in the newspaper. Where are the cowboys?
Yeah. Where's John Wayne?
Where are the mountains? Like, this is like industrial 1960s New York City, like nasty, right? And so it was just a big it's a big transition for anyone to be an immigrant. You know this.
Yeah.
It's just a big deal, and it emotionally forms who you are. So forget how they grew up or like whatever else happened, but the actual traumas of war and of movement, I give so much more grace to now as an adult that I can see that. But at the time when you're a kid, and my dad definitely has not worked on it, he wouldn't have even known where to start, right? It's too much.
It's a very recent thing. It's like you said, a few years ago, we didn't even say depression or mental health.
Right.
So imagine.
And he was 7, 8, 9. He was in that time.
Right.
Talk about a divorce. I think a divorce is a big deal. What if we rip you out of your country?
Yeah.
You don't speak the language. You get here, and nobody speaks, and they don't have like programs to teach you how to speak. So he was put into the classes with everybody with different abilities. He was put in. It was just a rough go. Mm-hmm. So like, again, I give it a little extra space in my heart to say that is tough, but how do I do the best with my kids? Because everybody's got a start, everybody's got a story, and how do I give them, because me leaving is probably the most traumatic thing that happens to them on a daily basis. So how can I make that the best, and where's my intention with it, right? Like
You probably, you FaceTime them, right? And
I do, but it's hard. Like FaceTiming a 5-year-old, they're not interested. Like he's like, I'm moving on, Mom. I got a color. I got stuff to do. Yeah. You can't develop the connection the same.
Interesting.
I could FaceTime Ben, and it means something, and we already have that established thing. And a phone call, actually for us, is like the best.
Yeah.
Because we're focused, and we really think, and we listen to each other's words, and we have a connection. The kids aren't. They're happy to see me. They're like, hey, good night, Mommy, love you. But it's not a real connection. Yeah. So I have to set it up in different ways, and I've found ways to do that. I think, in the best way I can.
Yeah, and they'll be fine. And the fact that they have even just such a conscious mom that later
helps.
on, can, whatever it is, set up the tools for them to be ready to face it later.
Yes.
Instead of it being so like traumatic where you just jump out of the house and you're out, you're making an effort.
And it's telling them also that what I'm doing is important. And that's where that settles is this the right thing to do or not? If I can't tell them...
And they can see you, right? Like a doctor, let's say, who's an emergency doctor and has to run out. They don't really know, but with you, they're like, oh, that's Mommy, she's on TV.
Right. But making it seem important, because TV to them is whatever. Like, they're not interested in it. But the storyline of it, if I tell them why the science matters behind, me going to Switzerland, that was like a longer trip to cover the glaciers, and explaining that, especially with the 7-year-old, that's when it feels like he's like, that is great. Like there's reason she's gone.
Yeah.
She's not just leaving to leave. So you have to tell that story and understand that they do understand a lot more.
I was talking to the team of somebody, actually Sadhguru, who because we did the Kiss the Ground, Save the Soil thing.
Yes.
And they were asking me about raising more awareness of the soil, should we interview this person or that person? I said, honestly, if you're thinking like TV and attention, look at Ginger Z. She's on a glacier talking about it. She's showing you.
Yeah.
She's like, you can see it. because as much as I love like interviews like this and we're talking, it's different when like you need to be there on it, show people, and you do that, which is incredible.
You got to touch it.
Yeah. So what is that like? Tell me what it's like to go on these stories. I've never gone on one that was nature related. I mean, I have like with you, you know, storms and stuff, but never something where you're on a glacier. There are probably polar bears and whales and drones and like the whole crew, the GMA, like they send a team. Which is such a rare opportunity. Like, are there other meteorologists that can do that? Probably not.
I came from a really, you know, we just hired a meteorologist, a third, and when we were on the search, everyone was like kind of looking, they're like, well, who has the experience? Like when I came in, I had been a storm chaser. I had been on a program called Storm Chasers, but I had chased since college. I had had experience telling environmental stories. I was really, it is unique. My background was unique, and not a lot of meteorologists get that. They are on a green screen and they've been in a studio the whole time. So very few, but my hope is that this starts to change because we have the scientific education to be the conduit of that science. So if you have the combo of someone who gets it, but then also can show it.
Well, that's also why we also think weatherman, weather girl, instead of saying meteorologist, because we literally know them as the people telling us that it's going to be sunny outside today. Thanks, I'd like to just open my window or use my app and know that it's sunny.
That's right.
I want someone like you who can explain to me that there are plastics in the ocean, that the soil is depleted. Like, how important is it to you that people know that you are a meteorologist and what you're able to tell us about the world rather than just the weather today?
Well, when I came in even to ABC, that's still, and never really at a network, we really didn't have, local meteorologists have been meteorologists for a long time. But at a network, it had always been kind of someone who was great on television, didn't necessarily have the science. So that was something that I wanted to change and feel like we have changed and we've built this. And then a couple of years ago, I said, it's not enough. Like, we need the climate connection, because if we don't start talking about that, my 30 seconds of it's sunny means nothing.
Good for you. So you spearheaded that?
Oh yeah, the climate unit is my baby. Like, that's where
you're amazing.
Well, I really tried, and then our new president is really who, she heard me. And within a month.
I don't know why I'm being teary-eyed. It's like crazy.
Yeah, she finally was like, I mean, I say she immediately, my first meeting with her, I said, I've been trying for 5 years to get this organized unit. And she was like, we need it. Let's do it. Within a month, we're like looking for people. It was unbelievable. So you do need those collaborators and the people who understand what you're saying. And she really has helped spearhead and, not spearhead, she has, as she says, clear the runway so that we can take off. And it's, I couldn't say enough wonderful things about how she thinks, I think.
What have you noticed, other than just like obviously it being a cool experience for you to get to go and do this? What have you noticed with your followers, with the audience? Are they reacting? Are they more aware now?
People want it. I mean, people are, they don't know enough. They kind of have the headline idea, but they'd like to know a little bit more. And that is my job now. And the beauty is I can translate that because I studied the atmosphere. So I have a really good grasp of the physics and the chemistry and the things. That's what I studied. So while I'm not a climate scientist, when I speak to a climate scientist, it's different than a typical reporter.
Right.
Because we can kind of cut through the basics, still give the basics for the viewer to understand, but then give, I hope, another layer that my audience could take away and say, oh my gosh, I'm bringing that to the water cooler. Like, I'm bringing that to the dinner table when somebody brings up whatever they bring up. Because
but also hopefully bring it into their life, like actionable
things too. When Switzerland's a great example of, and we actually had a very small team. You would have been like, oh, that's it?
Oh, really?
It was 5 of us total.
Whoa.
So walking in, it was a 2.5 mile hike, and this was not an easy hike, all the gear. And we get in there, the first day we went with the scientist to shoot the piece. And he's been studying there for 40 years. This guy was what a great character. He is actually, a documentary is being made about him because he's that good. And we were going in, and it was rainy and misty, and this is a part of the world where the glaciers are melting 3 times faster than the rest of the world. And it was falling apart as we were walking on it. You could feel it cracking, you could feel it melting, you could hear it, and then we were seeing crumbling parts off the sides of the mountains. The entire crevasse was changing as we were walking.
But what does that mean for us, right? Because like I've heard that the glaciers are melting, but I don't know what it actually means in life. It's
about the rapidity of it. It's about how quickly. The fact that I was walking through that within a day and seeing the landscape change. This scientist, he said, what he's doing is he's coming there every day and he studies every day. He will see a river change course over the course of 1 week. To be able to, it's how quickly these changes are happening. Our Earth has always evolved. It's always changed. That's
Which is the
what Earth
argument
is.
I was going to ask you.
Yeah.
That people who are like
Yeah.
against climate change, they'll say,
Yeah.
well, that's what the Earth does.
Well, they're right. That is what the Earth
Yeah.
does. But the Earth doesn't do it this fast. And that's what we've given it a real boost. And that's the unfortunate part, is that we don't know how it will react. We have ideas of how it's going to react. We're kind of living the reaction that has been forecast, more extremes, more closely together. So far, that's gives me, when you're covering a hurricane with me or a tornado or any of this, the number of them and the intensity of them in general, not everything, is meant to be higher. The other thing that people will say is, well, it's always changed and we've had warmer times. Of course we have. Those usually had something like the Earth's orbit changed, solar influence, there's volcanic, but none of those things have gone on. The only thing with the graph that follows the extreme rapid rise of temperatures is the greenhouse gas emission. And really the physics has been there for 50, 60 years. We know how it works. You trap air with a different type of air, carbon dioxide, methane, these greenhouse gases. It's like a blanket, and then it gets warm. It's really simple. That part, the science isn't what everybody's fighting about. It's about what we do about it. And I think that's where we have a lot of room to grow.
What do you think is like the most promising thing that you see now and you're like, okay, this could save us?
Money. Money
Really?
drives everything, and I get it really excited. I just told a story, I don't know what it airs, pretty soon, with a group in Brooklyn, two guys in Brooklyn who have a warehouse, and for the last 7 years, they have been making jet fuel out of carbon dioxide. So they take sequestered or captured carbon dioxide, and then they create jet fuel, just so you can put it directly into a jet just like we use now. Air travel has gotten and been vilified by most environmentalists and things, and at least for my job, it's the thing that I do the most that is the biggest footprint, and I do not shy away from saying it. We don't fly private, which is better.
Right.
But it's still.
You still need to do it though, yeah.
I do, and I need to go show and tell. How great would it be if I could do that in an electric plane? We're not there yet. We might be in a decade, but what could we do right now? These guys have figured it out.
But wait, they're actually pulling it from the environment?
It's pulling it from the environment, or from they're taking their most recent pull was from a biofuel that was already being made. So what would have gone up, they're grabbing before it goes up, they're splitting it apart, splitting apart water, and in a process, kind of looks like beer, like fermentation, they're separating it out into water, ethanol, and then jet fuel.
Did they patent this?
Yeah.
Okay, good.
Oh,
I want to protect these guys.
It's on, it's happening. Don't worry about them. What they did, what was really brilliant, because a lot of people, this is also science that everybody's kind of known about, but it's like, when was it going to become ability to do it to scale? They're doing it. And
Good.
I have huge hope
Did
that
they get the money? Like they can. Okay.
they're so smart. They did,
Good.
for the last 7 years, they've taken the ethanol and they've made vodka and perfume. High end, they sold it, they took that money, put it back in their R&D,
Whoa.
and they ran their business circularly, just like they run their water use, just like they run their renewable energy, just like they run everything. They're brilliant. They're really world-changing, and so I think you needed the science to meet the business. And I think in that case, those types of stories, I was nearly in tears, because I don't get into, when the earth is crumbling in front of me, it's not worth getting hopeless, because I do have great hope. Humans have been, have ingenuity and creative, and we will, but at the end of it, it's money.
It's
and
money.
guess what
We
these
live in
guys
a
are
material
about to
world.
make?
Money.
Money. And they know it, and they're brilliant because they did it altruistic. They did do it from a good standpoint, but they're there to make some money.
For sure.
And that's great.
Okay.
Actually, that's how we do it, and that's what
Yeah.
answers the policy question
Yes.
of what do we do about this? You make money, and then the
Yes.
world is going to suddenly. Now, could we do it? This is the next big, this is the more the social issue. Can we do it equitably? Can we make that jet fuel allow others to travel that have never traveled? Can we invest that transportation into places? That'd be pretty special. I don't know how close our world is to that, or what money will do for that, because we don't have a great history,
Right.
not just in this country, but globally
Yeah.
in doing that. But environmentally, I have a lot of hope
Wow.
because of money.
Speaking of environment, yeah.
Yeah.
I'm wearing this outfit
Yes.
I already told you, for the next 3 interviews. So I have one more here in New York, another one in DC in a couple of days.
Nice.
And as I was packing, like, how can I save room because I have like my podcast gear and all
Yeah.
this stuff. And I thought, you know what? I'm gonna pull a Ginger Z and I'll just wear the same outfit for all 3 interviews.
Yes.
Tell me a little bit about that, because you've been, and to be on a morning show, a massive morning show where really people are, because you've made it clear, like you'll post sometimes people's comments, but people are really looking at what you're wearing, how you look, what does your hair look like today? Tell me what you've been doing with clothes.
One place that I can make, like I said, until these guys' jet fuel comes out, I can't change the flight part of my job, which is a huge footprint. We vilify our transportation a lot. Our commute to work, our airplanes, anything we do, because we've all kind of learned that's, got problems.
Yeah.
So rarely do we think about where our food came from, how much, the story of our food and the story of our clothing. And the story of our clothing I got really interested in, not just for the environmental factor, which I always knew was huge. It is bigger than air travel.
Well, especially this whole mass, what is it called now?
Fast fashion.
Fast fashion. Oh my God.
Which we went really quickly to. 30 years ago, we didn't have fast fashion.
But hopefully we go as quickly as we went up, and now people are waking up, quickly go down, and realize that was a mistake.
That was a mistake.
I mean, everything I wear, honestly, is like full 100% linen, cotton, or silk.
Yes.
That's it.
The quality and the content of what we are. So I think people have gotten there with food, or at least they're aware. Like, I should ask, where did this come from? How was it made? What did the animal go through? A lot of questions, and that's gotten a lot of attention, as it should. I don't think fashion until just this last couple of years has gotten that. And I was always environmentally, both water use and carbon dioxide, I understood what it took. And I was careful, but I was not and then Remake Our World as a group, and they are all about the equity of women around the world being paid, because mostly women make those fast fashion choices and things. I started getting into that, and it was about the fairness and the story of the clothing I was wearing, and I was like, oh, it's terrifying.
Wow.
And when you start really putting those two things together, I took their 3-month challenge. It's a 90-day challenge of just buying no new clothes. And I thought, well, I'm not that huge of a shopper, but my job requires quite a bit, so I'll rent a lot and I'll shop my closet, which I don't always do perfectly. 3 months went by and I was like habitually changed.
Wait, so 3 months you didn't even rent?
I did rent.
Oh, you did rent. Okay.
I rented, and then secondhand is allowed. So like for an event, for a wedding, I purchased a secondhand dress. At the end of that 3 months, I'm like, that was nothing. I can go longer, and now I've made it over a year. And that's when people start to say, well, I don't know, that feels like really hard. Because again, I'm coming from a very privileged place to be able to say.
And I realized that right before I said, I only wear linen and silk, and then I was like, well, it is really expensive, and
But there is, and I just spoke at the UN last week with I moderated a panel of brilliant people, and I brought that up. I said, sustainability in clothing, if you try to have, like, I can go to LA, and there's great local designers that are using, but it's going to cost.
It's going to cost a lot.
$200 for
But
a
LA
top.
does have a lot of thrift stores too.
They do.
Yeah.
And that's where, this becomes, but I said in new clothes, sustainability and good product and all that stuff, and made here and made by people who we know are paid correctly and treated well. And she's like, well, that's the thing, is that your clothing has been subsidized forever in our lifetimes, but especially in the last 30 years. So those things cost a lot. Someone's time and effort and love pouring into a piece, we need to rethink how we look at it and how we pay for it.
I agree.
Our food and our fashion in this country specifically is some of the cheapest in the world. Because we've made it that way, that doesn't make it good. And that's what we have to kind of reset our brains, that we think, oh, that's too much. No, if you wear that top for the
I agree. 3 times.
Yeah,
and also, you're right, the work that put into it.
Yes.
I always think of that. I just bought like a beautiful jacket.
The story of it.
And it's like, it has like llamas embroidered into it. And I thought, wow, like to me, it doesn't go unnoticed that was hand embroidered, you know? Yeah.
So choices like that. And then, because she works around the world, and she was very much like with the lens of different culture, and she does everything. Her name is Samada, and she works with the RDG group, I believe. She changed my thought process, even on that part where I've just gone circular, because I'm like, the best thing I can do is not tell the company that I want something new. I would love for the big companies that we all, like that America shops at, I would love for them to not just make 100% recycled content or whatever to make new. Let your own store be circular. If I love Gap, if I love Banana Republic, I want to be able to shop secondhand at their stuff. Because yeah, there's something to like knowing that this works for me or this price point works for me,
Yeah.
but they need to make it work for us. So like in a, you know,
It has to be profitable for them.
yeah. And
Yeah.
I think there's a chance that that happens. Again, it's the money will drive it.
Yeah.
We'll get there. But I see the societal difference, just the interest in thrift and the change and the opportunity. The internet gave us such beauty. You know, Goodwill is online now.
I did not know that.
Just the last couple
What?
months. Yeah, that's huge. Think about what you could do if you can. If I
that's
can see
massive.
your Goodwill, I'm going to be able to say, oh, I want that piece or I want that whatever.
Yeah.
The Real. There are websites like that have just made thrifting so affordable. $8, $10, $12 denim that's usually $400.
Wow.
And then you've also just added to this circular economy. There is an economy in circularity. I also just shot a story at Barnard with the sustainable professor up there, and they run this thing called a green sale. It's for all the students and seniors. Kind of drop all their old stuff that they're never going to use, a small refrigerator, all the stuff that's very college.
Yeah.
They then sell it to the incoming students, the freshmen or the sophomores or whoever the next
Brilliant.
year, and it is just a full circle. That makes a lot of sense, but it's a microcosm of life. Like if we just look at that as they set it up, that's how all of our lives are. Like we don't need, and this is what made me feel hopeful too. She's written books on this. We made this linear system where we can get a broom from China
Yeah.
shipped to us in 24 hours. It's actually amazing, isn't it?
It is.
We've made that. We can reverse it so that getting one across town is actually easier than this.
Wow.
And that's where right now it's almost impossible. You know, like it doesn't,
So
we
true.
don't have the setup, but we already set it up. We actually set it up so well we can go around the globe. So we can set it up to do this, and all we have to do is just reverse it. So there's that also, that story gave me a lot of hope. Her whole thing is like about repair.
I mean, it sounds overwhelming when you say we can do that. For me, it sounds overwhelming, like, oh, but where do we start?
Yeah.
But then you highlight these people who are
Yeah.
doing it. It's almost interesting how we don't need to rely on like authority or certain like wait on someone to do it. There are these people on the ground making it happen.
Repair and care is huge. And so she teaches classes on how to repair everything. I'm all about like a button or fixing a sock or like, I've been able to do that kind of thing, which I guess traditionally people aren't even doing anymore. They're usually just tossing it or donating it, which usually gets tossed, and then buying a new one instead of like fixing the button. But she has been so inspired. She said, people think that we have this throwaway culture. She's like, people want their things. If they like their thing, there's just not a person to help them, and they didn't learn the skill of how to put that button back on. Or something as simple, and I thought was intimidating, she had a lamp that was like a college student's lamp, and it wasn't working. So most of us would be like,
Yeah.
bye lamp.
Yeah.
You know, like I'm not about to get into some wires and whatever. The lack of skill that we've all been taught about electricity, about the common things we all use
I'm
every
useless.
day.
I couldn't make a coffee this morning at my friend's coffee machine. I was like, I don't know.
Investing the time into those little skills is what she teaches. So they taught within seconds, this man's undoing the thing. He's like, oh, it's just a wiring thing right here. He had one part, he's like, this is a 50-cent part, fix this. All he did was put the wire around. I'm like, and he's like, as long as it's not plugged in, you're fine. Puts the wire around.
Think
works.
about the landfills and
Yes.
how many lamps, how many whatever
And
are
that's
there.
why, like, you know, reduce and reuse should be the only things in the arrows. There should be no recycle because it's not happening and it shouldn't happen, and get rid of that.
I mean, I hope you're right in the next 10 years. I really do.
I think so. I think we got to make it profitable,
Yeah.
but you can have repair people because you're not going to learn how to do that lamp thing,
Yeah.
and that's fine.
Yeah.
Have it be profitable where you and I need a lamp fixed. And so there are
Yes.
these things called like repair cafes. They're like pop-up fix shops.
Really?
Where you could bring anything that you've got that you love but is broken. Like I've lived with this toaster forever. Please look and see. And most of the time they're going to have an expert at these pop-up.
Where it's still cheaper to do that
Yeah.
rather than
Yep.
get a new one.
That's
and then
right.
it's good because you're helping this industry as well.
Yeah.
Amazing.
It's called a repair cafe, and
Wow.
they're like pop-up repair shops.
Wow.
Yeah.
Okay. I want to ask also about, because you post a lot, we just talked about this a little bit, about like, not a lot, but every now and then you'll highlight someone being like, your hair looks awful, or, right? Like,
They're my
crazy
favorite.
outfit, change
Yeah.
it, Ginger, you know? Or they don't even know that you're reading it. I've seen that
Oh,
too.
my
They do that on my YouTube channel too. They'll be like, the host, blah, blah, blah. And I'm
Yes.
like, who do you think is reading these comments?
Right.
You know? And so, but you're pretty good about like showing.
Yeah.
And somebody told me yesterday, actually, I was taking a walk at the park, with a friend, and she works with a lot of celebrities. And she said one particular one she noticed had like thousands of really positive comments. You look amazing, this and that. In one of them, they said something about her face and how it didn't look good.
Yeah.
That was the only comment she responded to.
Oh, yeah.
And she was like, I felt sad for this person because she didn't even like say thank you or something to all the amazing
really
comments.
important, yeah.
Right? They were totally all unanswered, like ignored, and then there was this one negative one, and she answered that one. So I want to ask about that, but also it ties into what you said in the very beginning of that kind of thing, the lies, the negativity is what gets a reaction out of people.
Well, that's helped a lot too. Social media, as negative as it's been in so many people's lives, and some really bad things can be on there. There is some good, at least me personally, has allowed me to learn how to have what I call the fence, and how to have, it helped me form my identity, my true identity. Because if I listened to all the people who started, when Twitter started, and I was working in Chicago and I had taken over for a woman who had been there a long time, the volume of hate mail in a large city like that, and I mean mail because at that time it was kind of transitioning away from mail, phone calls, and then the emails that went to everybody at the station. For some reason, the way they had it set up, and then Twitter. That combination of going into a city like that and getting kind of drowning in negativity, because most of those were negative. There wasn't a lot of positive that came at the beginning. I would often like see all of that after I was already hard on myself about how good my show was or how bad it was. And then I would just find myself in tears. There was a little office behind the desk where we worked, and I could shut the door and I would just go in and just cry because it hurt. And a lot of it was true, not true, but it was like taking my vulnerabilities of being fresh and new in the industry. I'd only been around like 5 years.
Right.
Of course we're not.
Instead of giving you a chance and being like, good job, keep going, try this, maybe some useful advice.
Yes. No. A lot of who spray painted that prostitute's clothes on, or like really negative, like pointed at my body, and then it took me a good year or two to start really seeing not just the good with the bad, but the bad with the bad, if that makes sense. I started getting, they'd be like, one person would say, that Ginger Z, she needs to go to the gym, she is looking plump. And then the second one would say, she is so thin, it's disgusting. And I'm like, hold on. How can two of those things be from the same day, from the same show, from the same thing? Oh my God, that's their opinion, right? Like that is it was like a revelation that these words were coming from the person's perspective, and they probably saw me on a different screen, who knows? But it gave me a little bit of a buffer, and that zone started to grow, and I started to realize if I don't put like a fence, and I think about it like a fence, where I see the person over there, I can hear them, I can kind of, reach over, kind of like Wilson over, in the Home Improvement. But I can have them have their thoughts and their process, but I can keep mine on this side. As I did that, I started growing my own identity, truly. And then I started realizing I could apply that to my real life, and that I could protect this part, grow this part. Now, in real life, you don't want to have a fence forever, because then you don't have a natural attachment. I can open a gate, come over there. What am I responsible for? Can I help? Can I be a part of that? But also, when it's need to be, I can be safely on this side. My mom was a perfect, example, and I wrote about this in the book a lot. She's volcanic, she's explosive, and she's a passionate woman, but she had uncontrollable extremes. And I would always get sucked into that. It was always my fault. It was always, not that she said that necessarily each time or whatever, but that made me kind of an absorber, an empath, people will call it. I've been able to use that now with people in my life, and I wish I would have had the skill as a child, as a teenager, to be able to say, I'm going to put this right here. I can empathize, Mom, with what you're going through. Man, that must be tough, but like it's hitting the wall. It's hitting my fence, and it's going back toward her. I do that in life now with other people, because I used to do the same thing. If you were upset, even early in my career when we worked together, I probably would have immediately jumped into your emotion, spiraled down with you, and not helped the situation whatsoever. Twitter and all these things taught me to be able to separate. And it is such strength in being able to do that. And then the versatility of being able to open the door. And that's what I try to do. I think I've got a pretty decent assessment of who people are online. I can tell by the words they use, how the people that are really hurting, and that's why they're doing it. There's people who are just bot-like and trying to needle you and whatever. there are people who have done this to everybody and they're mean as shit and they just need to say something terrible to someone. I don't even know if it's coming from just their own negativity or what. And then there's the people who are genuinely curious or have a real opinion that probably means something, you know, like, and it's hard to hear, and there are once in a while that gets me.
I think I've seen you put those up too as well.
Yeah.
You're like, okay, fair point,
Yeah.
but also.
Yeah. I try to assess that, and I try to take real care with how I respond. If it's the first two, if it's the ones that are, I mean, if it's the hurting person, I'll never do it. I can tell. And I'll usually actually DM them now, or I'll find a way to message them and say, are you okay? Because I know that you must be really in pain. And I don't want it to come off, that's a private message. I'm not trying to come off shitty and, you know, like trying to get at them. No. Those other ones in the middle, they're assholes. But they are bringing up often a controversial topic, like women in the workplace and having a family. I love those. They're like, how do your kids even know you? That's an important one to respond to, because whether they're meaning it terribly or wherever their intent came from, they're not hurting, they're just judging. So I'm going to bring it up because it's a huge conversation point. And there are a lot of people who think that way. And I'll say, well, this is how I was raised, and this is what I feel, and this is whatever. I appreciate your opinion. 9 times out of 10, they're my biggest fan after that. And they're like, oh, you are doing it. Like, I'm like, what?
I love that.
Yeah.
I've seen that too. I've seen
Oh my God, they're like my best friend then.
Yeah.
You know, like, so there's that you're human, you're putting a human to it. But also I love using it when it's a good, the hair stuff, when I wear my hair naturally curly. That was a huge conversation, because there's this weird percentage of people that think it's unprofessional, that word unprofessional with curls. I'm like, when did that become a thing? And like, I come at it with real naivety like that. I kind of know, but like, I want to hear their opinion. If that's what you really think, I like it like this, and I'm sorry that you feel that way, right? And so it starts to teach you those words and those abilities so I find social in that way to be so great. And if I don't, like today, I don't think I got a lot of negativity, and I feel like I didn't do something right.
See, that's what's crazy, is you're on a daily show.
Yeah.
So then you like see the reaction right after.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I was talking to somebody a few days ago about the same thing with, I said, when I do an Instagram live, of course I have a good light on me or whatever else, usually if I'm at home, and I'll get a comment, and or, you know, most of them will be nice, and always there's like one or two where they'll just say Botox. They won't even say anything else. And I literally, you know what makes me mad? Okay, Ginger, look at me right now. Do I have Botox?
Yeah, not in your, no.
Literally on the floor, no. Like I don't, it's like, I do a lot of things. Laser, stem cells, PRP, like I do a lot of things. But I don't get Botox. So for me, when I look at that, like sometimes there's ones that are worth answering, like you said, because they're asking like something like, hey, do you get Botox, or is there a then I can be like, no, because you know I like natural things, but this is what I do. Yeah, you can check out my video about stem cells, whatever. But when they just go Botox, I go block.
Yeah.
Because first of all, I'm like, first of all, you should know I'm very savvy, and if I was gonna get Botox, I'd get it for free and do it on camera. First of all, I wouldn't be hiding it.
You don't know me.
Secondly, everybody gets Botox. Your mom, your neighbor, your whatever. I'm getting stem cells. Like, calm your butt down. You know?
Right?
Like, so yeah, it's funny like to see who you respond to, and also see how they change, right?
Yes.
Like if somebody did say, did you get Botox or whatever, I'd say, no, I get stem cells, and they go, oh, cool. Where do you get it? And I say, well, there's a video, check it out. And they go, thanks so much, just subscribe.
Yep.
You know, and then all of a sudden this person who you might have been offended by or whatever is now a fan.
Yes.
Subscribe to your channel.
They do. And the physical parts, I was saying this to Shania earlier, is like the physical parts of us, when we are the product, when you are on the camera and now you are the business, you are the everything, it's very difficult to separate your identity from that.
Yeah.
I believe impossible to totally separate, but to create something where you can separate and say, you know, it's not like Beyonce and Sasha Fierce necessarily, but it is a little bit. And I don't know, it's a different form of, it's not lying, it is separating. It's creating two places of safety and comfort. And I love answering as much as I possibly can. There's not much that I haven't said, and what a safe place that's been, you know, to talk about safety. I have been the most vulnerable. I've told everybody my worst, deepest, darkest secrets, coming from a place of all lying all the time. And I mean lying I was a CEO of perfectionism. Like all I wanted was to be.
This is the image you get. This is what you
and
see.
that was before social media. Like that wasn't formed because of social media. That was formed because of me. And I thought I needed to be there because I wasn't ready to be vulnerable. When I got that help and I ripped the Band-Aid, not a Band-Aid, an entire body cast off of letting people in and letting them see all of my faults, was really hard the first time, but now it is so healing and so beautiful because I let the wound that had gotten dirt kicked in and covered up and covered, I finally have let it start to really heal. And that it's not done yet, and I'm not expert at this. I can't tell you what will happen when the next trauma happens, but I have a lot of tools that are a lot better than I did the last time.
Wow, yes. Can we give a viewer or two viewers away a copy of your book?
Yeah,
one
of
of
course.
them, the first one maybe?
Yeah.
So they get like
I've
an intro.
I actually just got some from the publisher. I'd be happy to.
Oh, yes.
Yeah.
Wait, which one would you like to give away?
Yeah, let's do natural disaster. That's
Natural
better.
disaster. So for people who are watching on YouTube, they can just type in the comments natural disaster and we'll pick one person, give it away.
Great.
And if they're listening
Let's
on
do
a
5.
podcast, can we really?
Yeah.
5 people?
I'll send them to them, yeah.
Oh, amazing. Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, let's do that. 5 people. Yes. Thank
Yeah,
you.
of course.
And if you're listening on a podcast app, just give it a rating, a 5-star rating.
Yeah.
So yeah, thank you, Ginger.
Thank you.
I want to be respectful of your time because you are, like you said, balancing motherhood, and it's about time that you got to go.
Well, I like, and what I'll say is that your title, and I just wanted to say that because I think, quite frankly, frankly is to speak of honesty and speak of, not just like speak our truth, like that's so overused, but being frank can be difficult. And I don't mean being you, but I mean being that in life. And just like I'm teaching my 5-year-old, I think that part, if you can tell your own story, my encouragement to others would be write your own down. Everybody has something to say, and I'm not telling you to go journal every night. I'm saying take some time, especially if you've had a trauma or if you've had some sort of emotional break of any sort, or even just today, I don't know, if you're having a great day, it doesn't matter. Take some time to reflect on that and kind of interview yourself, because we all don't get that enough in general. Not everybody has this opportunity to talk. Write it down. If you feel comfortable or you'd like to share it with someone else, that's just the beginning of unwrapping that tissue and that scar and all those things, and to be frank about those things. Not one person doesn't have wounds all over them. I have so many. I still have some that I've reserved for myself, but I've told a lot of them, and I cannot express how beneficial it can be to be frank.
Wow.
And to be honest and to let that go. And I would hope that other people can take that because, gosh, I wish I would have done it earlier. And the other thing I always want to make sure people know is, our country was founded on this pursuit of happiness, and happiness is such a transient emotion. It's such a strange thing. It was kind of like an FU to to England, is what the whole point of it was. Like, we weren't happy there. I get it, but guys, it's super spiteful.
Yeah.
It's not the best thing to found things on. So that's embedded in our society, is to pursue happiness. And if we don't see that goal of happiness, it's like, oh, but are they happy? It's like we see someone who's in a new relationship. It seems great on them. Like, but are they really happy?
Yeah.
And that's like what somebody wants to find the negative, and we want to find the negative comment. We shouldn't pursue happiness. I have changed it to pursuing peace, because having peace with every emotion has also been where I've found incredible healing. Again, I'm not an expert at this, but when something hurts, or when it's frustrating, or when I need to say, and I've learned this from my husband, say what you mean, it's hard. Work culture, there's times where it's like, oh, it's like the last thing I want to do is have another confrontation with the same person I've had, but you have to. And the ability and the beauty of how much you can grow, it's going to suck, and we're going to have anxiety leading up to it. But like, now that I sit in that, I try to pursue peace with that, knowing that emotion's there, letting it kind of be like with me for that moment. The anxiety and the hyper awareness of when that moment happens, and then the feeling after, right? And allowing the peace through all of those, and then meditation has helped.
Oh, meditation.
Meditation is where I've been able to learn that skill, apply it, and I can't encourage that enough. It's like, write, meditate, and have the ability to just find peace instead of happiness.
Even that is such a daily practice that you can do.
Oh,
right?
I've been happy 5 times today. I've been sad a couple. I've had frustration. I've had little peaks of anger, or each one comes at you so many times a day. And just like natural disasters, and this is another thing that I like to hit on because it's what I do.
Yeah.
I've been watching storms from Hurricane Katrina on, and I am there before, during, and after one of their worst traumas of their life. So what a weird and unique situation. I've been able to sit back and I watch the psychology of people. if we could learn from how people react to natural disasters and apply that to our own mental health, we'd be really far. First of all, you can't run away and say that didn't happen, that used to be my specialty. When something traumatic happened, I would pretend
Sweep it under the rug.
Sweep it under the rug. When a tornado takes your house, you can't do that. So the processing of trauma has to happen. So if we can kind of treat our traumas like tornadoes, right? Like, yes, that happened. Not only this, my neighbor had it. You had the same trauma. I watched the healing that automatically happens. People go through this, doesn't matter what kind, wildfire, flood, they all act the same. And they go through this like grief process that's fast, and it's not like it is with loss of, human on human, or, there's a lot of grace with nature. But then they have this thing, then they have community, and then we tell our story. Oh, look at how the community came together. Well, no crap. Like, they all had to, because they don't know where to get insurance or how to do it. But for the first time, you're looking at your neighbor and saying, oh, how do we do this together? There can be a lot learned about that initial part, but here's the part that I hope that people can take away that I've learned a lot more. And after that initial healing, you have to maintain it. Just like in grief after someone passes away or after a tornado, the relief and the help and the support are all there, and they're pouring in, and it's nonstop, and you feel great, and you process things pretty quickly. And then 6 months or a year later, everybody kind of forgot, but it's still your trauma. And so we haven't maintained that, whatever it was, meditation, whatever it was that got us through that initial part, and the support's not there anymore. And suddenly, we've kind of forgotten about how to maintain that healing. And I would encourage people to think about that. We're doing a story soon on 5 years after, someone was in one of the fires and they lost their home. And like, once that initial help goes away and you get through the shock of like, crap, my whole house is gone, everything.
That's a great story to do.
Yeah,
wow.
And now there's a helpline that is specific to natural disaster, like that people lose because that year after and year to 5 years is incredibly difficult.
The helpline is like for trauma? Oh, wow.
Extended trauma.
Extended. Because two things came up when you said that. Is the first I thought of when I covered for years, mass shootings.
Yes.
I mean, probably a dozen of them, a dozen big ones.
Yep.
And I remember in Vegas, it was that one that somebody asked me, like, is it hard? What do you see? Whatever else they were asking me. And I said, there's one shooter, but what you see for the week after is thousands of people coming together, donating blood, donating clothes. That's what I focus on. And that's what it's almost like when I say that's what I focus on, this is such a stupid comparison. I have this pimple right here, and I never get pimples anymore. I mean, it's been years, but I put this patch on, and I told my friend yesterday, and she goes, you know what, Frank? I've been talking to you for an hour. I was looking at your eyes. I was looking at your spirit, your passion. I didn't even notice.
No.
It's like, instead of looking for the negative, look for the good that's happening, the positive. Like, what can you find that's beautiful?
Yeah, and then how can you extend that beauty?
And then, so that was the other thing, the extension that you were saying, is I thought about like all the ayahuasca ceremonies I've done, where I think the reason why people go back over and over, I go to teach classes, but I'm not necessarily sitting in the ceremonies, right? I'm pretty much done with that unless there's a family member who wants me there. But the reason why I think people go over and over and over is they didn't maintain some kind of daily practice. So they want that feeling again, and then they come back a year later, and then the next year. And
it's a reset for sure. There's rituals to it. That's why religion was so closely tied a lot of times, or became part of, in the spirituality that is born from ayahuasca or peyote, like I did, and I wrote about that too. The experience of, and why it's finally coming back into more the lexicon of like,
the shamans are starting to share it again too. I think they realize
that it's not going to be
needed.
It is, but that's the checking into the hospital part. That's the extreme, and it's not something that needs to be done regularly, or to each different.
To each their own, but you're right.
As a process, as part of the healing process, as part of our development as humans, I think it's incredibly necessary. I wish everybody would have an opportunity to do it safely and in a great place and be able to, but that's a whole different, we can do a different podcast.
Yeah, a whole episode on that.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you so much. Wow, I know people are going to love this, so thank you.
I hope so.
Yeah.